We're four friends with hot takes on food media.
And we're here to review and recap all kinds of food shows in bite-sized seasons.
Plus, virtual potlucks, cooking adventures, and food memes.
Welcome to Pod Appétit Gourmet Takes.
Hi, I'm Amanda.
Hey, it's Justine.
And it's me, Meg. Welcome to the start of a brand new season of Pod Appétit. This time we're covering the Netflix original series, The Chef Show, Season 1, Volume 1. In The Chef Show, writer, director, and food enthusiast Jon Favreau and chef Choi explore food in and out of the kitchen with accomplished chefs and celebrity friends. On the menu for today's episode, we have Episode 1, Gwyneth Paltrow and Bill Burr, and Episode 2, Avengers Atlanta. But before we get into the chef show, let's find out what we've been cooking, eating, and getting up to in the kitchen. Amanda, what have you been doing?
Eating my Jell-O from last week.
Your broken ice tort?
Yes, my broken ice tort. Like, truly, I finished it last night, like, because it's so many servings.
Wow.
So, that's about all.
So it took a week to eat that whole thing.
Yeah, and that Jeremy ate some too. Like, it took me a whole week to eat that.
How'd it hold up?
It was a lot.
I was like, last night, it held up pretty well, I think. You know, I probably should have put a lid on it at some point, but I didn't, so...
Just thinking that sweet, sweet fridge juice.
Delicious. And listeners, if you want to hear more about the broken ice tort Jell-O recipe, listen to our previous episode, our Tastination potluck episode.
What about you, Justine?
I also have a throwback to my potluck. I made just the baked tofu meat portion that I had made. I just really liked how it was marinated and baked off, and I made that and put that in tacos. So yeah, I got some corn tortillas and, you know, assorted vegetables, and then that like sort of chickeny tofu meat, which is what it kind of turns into, and had that in tacos. And then I also made barbecue jackfruit pulled pork sandwiches. So I had a lot of good eating this week. Nom, 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 nom.
How did your parents' meat pie turn out?
Visually awful, but they said it tasted good.
That's all that matters.
Yeah, as long as it tastes good.
I can't believe that was their first pie they've never made a crust before. I mean, like, same with me, but I'm also, like I said, had a lot of tips from Bake Off, so I need to teach them a few things. That's how it's gonna be. I'll teach my parents how to cook. How about you, Meg?
So I made the brothy beans recipe that you might remember Carla Lolly Music made in a video we covered forever ago, where she was like, beans. It was just all about beans all the time. But yeah, so this is a recipe that she adapted by Chef Patch Troffer of Marlowe and Sons in Brooklyn. So basically it's just you get dry beans, you soak them overnight, and then you simmer them for a really, really, really long time. So this took me about 3 hours of simmering before the beans were done, which is not surprising because even on the bean package itself, it said this might take 1 to 3 hours for the beans to be done. And I used Royal Corona beans, which are a type of runner bean. They're these nice big fat white beans. So it took a really long time. The end result was good. I don't know if it was 3 hours worth of good, but no matter what I do with these beans, it will take approximately that long to prepare them, unless I put them in a pressure cooker or something. So I still have about a pound of these beans left, and I'm trying to decide what to do with the remainder of them, because the brothy beans were, like, they were good, but I didn't love them.
Are you thinking about doing pressure cooker for the next round?
I think maybe, because we do have a pressure cooker, so then at least it wouldn't take quite as long to prepare them.
The Midwesterner in me is like, make a bean salad.
Yeah, I've got a pretty good Mexican bean recipe I could make, so maybe I'll do that next time. Alrighty, so let's get into it. We are talking about The Chef Show on Netflix. The first episode of Season 1, Volume 1 features Gwyneth Paltrow and Bill Burr. And the description of this episode is, Roy and Jon cook a Goop-friendly pepper pot with Pepper Potts herself, Gwyneth Paltrow. Then comic Bill Burr swings by to make some sandwiches. But I feel like before we get into this, I think we need to rewind a little bit for a little bit of context, like who's Jon Favreau and who is Roy Choi? Because Lord knows the show itself will not tell you anything about anybody. It just assumes that you know absolutely everyone who appears on screen. So,
I mean, I did, but yeah. But that is a very, very good point.
True, yes.
If you don't know who these people are, you would be completely lost.
Yeah, you get like a little chyron on the bottom that's like comedian, and it's like, okay, I guess that's all the context I need. But yeah, Jon Favreau is an actor and director. He's probably best known for his work in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That's certainly one he got on my radar. Roy Choi is a chef and cookbook author. He runs the food truck called Kogi Barbecue. He is Korean American, and he is a big advocate of food truck and street food recipes and people who make street food. He's also a James Beard Award winner. He won the award for his TV show called Broken Bread. And Jon and Roy made a movie together of essentially the same name. It's just called Chef. It came out in 2014. Roy Choi served as a producer, and he really showed Jon Favreau the ropes, really wanted him to, quote, get it right for a cooking movie. So he was very hands-on in the advising of the food side for the Chef movie.
Have either one of you watched the movie Chef?
I watched Chef for the first time earlier this week.
Okay, I did too, as homework.
I have not. I went in blind.
So yeah, we could just briefly talk about the movie, because I do think it informs the show a bit, because it really does seem like Jon Favreau just had so much fun doing the movie that he was like, hey, I guess I'll make a whole show of this. That's how I think the show came to be.
So, Justine, since you went in cold to this, did it fully make sense? I mean, I feel like every time, at least in this first episode, they at least were like, oh yeah, that's when Leguizamo's dancing, and then they showed like a tiny clip from the movie. Was that enough context, or was that confusing?
I mean, it's not confusing. I know it's based off a movie, and I've seen clips of the movie before. Like, I think there's one where I've definitely seen an entire clip, like Variety does, like, real chef watches, chefs in movies and breaks down scene. So I've seen clips of it from other shows. I don't know. Is it? Yeah. In this episode, when they're like talking about like the grilled cheese and stuff, like at first I didn't have context from it, but watching the episode, you learn. I'm like, okay, so there was this grilled cheese segment at the very end, and then everybody now sends pictures of grilled cheeses to Jon Favreau, as he says a million times in the episode.
If you want to watch it, you can, but I think the show at least like refers back to it enough like to give you some context.
Oh, yeah, it refers back to it a lot.
Yeah.
It really, I was not expecting it. As soon as I started watching this morning, I was like, oh, okay, no, this is straight up. The reason it is called The Chef Show is not because Roy Choi is a chef, but because this is from the movie Chef.
Yeah, I was actually really surprised to see that the upcoming episode that we're going to cover in our next Pod Appétit is called Episode 3, Chef Film Recipes. And I'm just like, couldn't you call these two episodes that as well? Like, what do you mean you need a whole nother episode just for the chef film recipes? But okay, I guess we'll find out what that's about later.
I also think it's interesting that they started filming this show, and they talk about it a couple times, without even knowing what the show was going to be. They just wanted to start rolling tape on them hanging out, essentially, and be like, we'll figure it out what it is later. We just want to keep hanging out and cooking.
I will say that's one of my first impressions / criticisms that I kind of wanted to talk about, is that it feels a little, I don't know if snobby is quite the right word, but a little bit snobby, like, we're too good to introduce ourselves. We're too good to even have a concept for our show. We're so awesome that as long as we just record ourselves shooting the shit, people will watch us. And I mean, apparently that's true. I'm sorry to say, but it kind of struck me the wrong way. I didn't particularly like that aspect of it.
What I really got the vibe of, especially in the second episode that we're going to talk about today too, I left it thinking like, okay, so Jon Favreau has just got so much money that he'll just like do people's hard jobs for funsies, you know?
Let me get back there in the kitchen, even though I probably don't have a food handler's license or even know how to be in a professional restaurant at all.
I don't know. I'm trying not to slag on it too much, but it's like a hard turn vibe from like when we were just watching Taste the Nation to this. And I'm still trying to figure out what the show is.
I'm still trying to figure out what the show is. Something that we all loved about Taste the Nation is how many women's stories were in it. Whereas it appears that women just don't exist in this universe unless you're Gwyneth Paltrow. Or if we're talking about the movie as well, women only exist to be sex objects because you've got Scarlett Johansson and Sofia Vergara just looking beautiful and not really doing anything else at all for the whole movie. So
yeah, and basically just being like, you know what you need to do, man, is live your dream.
You know what you need to do is live your dream and not make any sacrifice or compromises at all, and you'll still get everything you ever wanted and more by the end of the movie.
Oh, and I will bankroll everything because
yes, I will bankroll everything. The movie was enjoyable just because it was lighthearted. It had nice food porn, but the stakes were so low. The hero didn't have to do anything to get everything he ever wanted. And like you said, money wasn't even a problem. There's one point where he's like, I lost my job, I'm broke. And his ex-wife is like, that's okay, I'll pay for you to go to Miami and hook you up with a free food truck and bankroll you to get you started. Oh, and by the way, my ex-husband is going to help us with all this as well. So, yeah.
Justine, you need to watch this and we need to have a full text conversation.
Yeah, maybe we should. Maybe I should put a pin in some of my other comments about the movie. But I guess I will just say the movie, if you looked up the term vanity project in a dictionary, there would be a picture of Chef, the movie. And maybe
that's what this show feels like.
Yes, and the Chef show as well, for sure.
Yeah, I would say both seem a lot like, again, that Jon Favreau thinks Roy Choi is really cool and he just wants to hang out with him all the time.
Yes. And he's going to film it while they hang out. Which
I totally like understand the criticism, and truly the criticism about like women being non-existent unless you're Gwyneth Paltrow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then I skipped ahead in the episode descriptions, and I could be mistaken, but based on the episode descriptions, a female chef doesn't show up until season 1, volume 3. So we don't get any women for a very long time in this show.
Oh,
this is such a hard turn for our podcast.
I know, right?
Well, but this is a show that all of us have talked about wanting to watch for a long time.
It's true. Yeah.
Truly.
Yeah. And like all of these criticisms are very valid, but at the same time, I do enjoy most of the people that are involved in this. Like, I do like Jon Favreau. Mm-hmm. I definitely don't love all of his work. I think the remake of The Lion King was one of the worst movies of that year because it's just a shot-for-shot remake. But at the same time, he's also made my all-time favorite Christmas movie, Elf. Like,
Elf is so good.
I love Elf. Like, it just, it brings me so much warmth and happiness. Like, there would be no Star Wars television right now without Jon Favreau. Like, I think he's very talented, and both Chef and the Chef show, it felt like he also was like, not only do I want to hang out with Roy Choi, but I have some fun friends that I just want to like have show up for cameos every now and then. Like, hey, remember, I'm friends with Robert Downey Jr. Let's just throw him in here.
Yeah, and Chef and the Chef show were both on my radar for a very long time for similar reasons. I'm a big fan of the MCU in general. I love Iron Man. It's one of my favorite MCU movies, definitely one of my favorite MCU characters. But I will say that I am starting to feel that superhero fatigue. I haven't seen Spider-Man No Way Home yet. I hear it's amazing. I haven't seen it yet. Maybe it will pull me out of this slump. But I am less jazzed to talk about Marvel these days than I would have been maybe even like a year ago. Yeah,
that
I know. It's just
big
like,
from you, Meg.
I just really hate that Disney has a stranglehold on apparently all of the world's pop culture. This is really depressing and sad to me. And I hate to see that unless you're Disney or Marvel IP, you'll never get a screen in a movie theater ever again, which I think is a sad trend for our culture in general, but I guess we'll see.
Which is also interesting because Chef the movie, Favreau straight up was like, I don't want to do this through Disney. I don't want to have a huge budget. And he did just basically call in favors with friends and did an independent project. So it's like, I respect that side of it too. I feel very conflicted, guys.
Yeah,
I'm so
me too.
But the only part I realized watching this first episode of the chef show that I had seen before was it had gone viral, the whole Gwyneth Paltrow forgot she was in Spider-Man.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, this is so good. This is such a good segue into actually talking about this first episode with Gwyneth Paltrow and Bill Burr. It's an infamous clip. It's definitely gone viral on the internet. Please continue.
But so that's what I had seen before is Jon Favreau going, yeah, well, we were in Spider-Man. And she's like, no, I was in Avengers. and he's like, yeah, we also were in Spider-Man. And then that Roy Choi's like, yeah, Spider-Man Homecoming. And like, so like I had seen that clip before and then now seeing it in context, it's just interesting because I feel like, first of all, that Gwyneth is like your first guest, one of the least relatable people on the planet. While I enjoy a lot of her work, and don't get me wrong, like I love her as Pepper Potts in the MCU. Like absolutely love her as Pepper Potts. I am also a big Iron Man 3 stan. I love that movie. Give me all the Shane Black Christmas movies.
Baby, yeah.
Yep, it is my favorite Iron Man movie, which is controversial. But my point is, like, so Gwyneth Paltrow is not relatable. And then also, you know, there's the whole Goop, and, like, she has the vagina-scented candles, and, like, she just, nothing about her is relatable. And then even she knows she's just there for no reason. Because she's like, oh, you put me in charge of the parsley? Like, that we don't need any more of? You know, it's just like... She seems to feel that she's superfluous for this. And then the part of her that, of course they knew it was going to go viral because she didn't know, but it just also makes her look like an idiot. Whereas even if she's not relatable, she's not an idiot.
Yeah.
Like,
and
she's
she
a very
does
intelligent
remember
woman.
once they tell her, oh, it's that scene with the press conference. And she's like, oh, yeah, I remember that. I really don't want to come to Gwyneth Paltrow's defense because she doesn't need it. But in her defense, sometimes Marvel actors only get their pages of the script because they want to protect against spoilers of the movies, because Tom Holland, for example, who we'll see in the next episode, and Mark Ruffalo, they're constantly spoiling things in press junkets. So Marvel has really limited access to what the actors even know they're working on. So it's quite possible that Gwyneth got her pages and didn't even know what movie it was for when it was filming. And sometimes scenes have even gotten shuffled from one movie to another. So I'll just say that, but I don't really want to come to Gwyneth's defense.
Yeah, again, she's not relatable in any way.
Literally, all she does, she gets a call, she shows up, she delivers the lines. That's her job. She did it.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's very clear, not just from these comments in this episode, but just from other comments she's made in general. She never, ever watches Marvel movies, which I'm kind of like, okay, that's fine. You know, you showed up, you said your lines, you got your paycheck. I guess you're not obligated to actually watch the movies.
I just don't know why they had to call this pepper pot goopified when they just mean vegetarian, because goopified.
Yeah, to your point, Amanda, not only did she seem superfluous, but at the same time, I kind of also got the impression that she felt like she was too good to be told how to help put together this recipe. Like, she never really asked questions. She didn't really seem that curious about the recipe, whereas the other guests we've seen so far are like, oh, why do you do that? Or, oh, why is it cut that way? Whereas she just couldn't care less about how or why this recipe was happening. Okay, we seem to have lost Amanda. Technical difficulties, but she will come back as soon as possible, hopefully.
Totally. Well, so what did you think? The segments are so short in these episodes. They're very much like YouTube videos stitched together. That's like how short they feel.
I actually kind of like it so far. I think we'll see how I feel about it as the show goes on, but it was kind of nice to give me an indication of like, oh, I should take notes now about what I just watched. So I kind of liked the very distinct, clear breaks. Another thing I did like was the stop motion animation of the food truck I think is really cute. I really enjoy the animation.
It's cute.
I really like the exploded view of the recipe where they have, again, this little, I guess, claymation, stop motion animation of the dish exploding to show all of its separate elements. I like that a lot as well. So I'm enjoying the short segments so far. So yeah, that's basically all there is to the Gwyneth section. And then they make the roast mojo pork, which, as we mentioned earlier, was something that John Leguizamo's character made in the movie. So they decided to make that in order to make Cubano sandwiches later.
You know what I know the mojo pork from?
What?
Taste the Nation Holiday.
Oh, bringing it all together.
That's right. I was like, I know this.
But yeah, so the next guest on this episode was Bill Burr, who is a comedian and an actor. And speaking of Disney having its fingers in everything, he's also in the Mandalorian TV show on Disney Plus for a short while.
Oh, is it because he's best friends with Jon Favreau?
Yeah, probably.
I'm sensing a trend here.
So I'm not terribly familiar with Bill Burr's work in general. I've seen some of his stand-up. What I've seen of his stand-up I've enjoyed, but I don't really have a strong opinion about him. I liked him in this episode. I thought that he was very personable. He had some funny comments to make. He asked questions, which I always find endearing. I like when people show up wanting to learn something from someone who's clearly an expert. So I enjoyed this segment.
Yeah, I like that he was like nervous about being on the grill and like having responsibilities, that he was gonna mess it up in front of everybody. It was
Yeah.
relatable. I also like the way Roy talks about food and that like the food talks to him.
Mm-hmm.
Did you notice that? He's like, the sandwich will let me know. And I'm like, ooh. Or he's like, the cheese will tell me.
It's something we've definitely talked about on the show before, which is that true professionals, once they know what they're doing, it's not about following a recipe. It's about seeing how it looks, how it sounds, how it smells. There are so many other indicators that show when something is done. Or in the next episode where they're talking about the shrimp and they're saying, oh yeah, us chefs could just look in there and see that it was done. And Jon Favreau says, I just frantically pull stuff out of the oven before it burns. So I think that is definitely the cutoff of like, can the food indicate to you when it's done without, looking at a timer or what have you? So the grilled cheese sandwich that they referenced, I will say that when I watched the grilled cheese scene in the chef movie, I was curious to know whether it was strictly butter they were putting on the grilled cheese or whether it was mayo, because this has been something that's been introduced to us on the podcast as the butter versus mayo technique. Also the cold start versus hot start. Do you start your sandwich on a cold surface and bring it to temp, or do you start it on an already hot surface? So I was curious to know what Roy Choi's technique was. It seems like he's a butter guy and he's a hot start guy. So I enjoyed seeing his technique.
I think that it was very interesting about like, he made a perfectly great grilled cheese and he's like, nope, wasn't perfect. Throw it out. And I'm like, oh my God.
You could tell that the cheese in the center wasn't melted. So I have to agree. Maybe it's like that pancake rule. The first pancake never turns out right. Although when I'm making grilled cheese at home, there's no way I'm throwing out an imperfect grilled cheese. I'm just going to eat it.
And they use so much cheese, so many different kinds of cheese.
Yeah, 2 different kinds of cheddar, Gruyere, Parm. It looked really good. It really did look like the platonic ideal of a grilled cheese. Nice and gooey and perfectly golden brown and crispy. I would eat it.
Yeah, there's definitely, with the things I like category of the show, there's that like artistic perfection that you see in this that you don't really see in like other like shows where they're just teaching you how to do a recipe.
Mm-hmm.
This is just like Roy is just on the line serving at a restaurant. Like that's the vibe it is.
Mm-hmm.
So he's just trying to make it his way and like have little things here and there. But if it's not good enough, it's not up to his standards. It's not, he'll say it, he'll say what's wrong with each little thing,
Yeah, it's definitely a point of pride for him. It's his profession. It's what he's trained to do. So it is really interesting to see him want everything to turn out so well. And it's especially funny to see him working alongside Jon Favreau, because Jon's kind of like his apprentice in a way, you know, so he really wants Jon to do well because it will reflect well upon him.
This is such a weird dynamic.
It really is. Speaking of throwing stuff away, this episode ends with Roy taking one little bite of a stale beignet and then tossing it in the garbage. So I guess don't let your Café du Monde beignet mix go stale is the lesson of that segment. Okay, that's going to do it for Goop and Bill Burr. We'll be right back to talk about the next episode, Avengers Atlanta. And we're back. In episode 2, Avengers Atlanta, Roy and Jon assemble some of the Avengers in Atlanta, including Robert Downey Jr. and Tom Holland, along with the Russo brothers and Kevin Feige.
You know, he says including, but those are the only 2 Avengers.
Yes, that was not the best
I was
write-up.
expecting more Avengers based off of this title.
You are absolutely correct. That could have been written a little bit better.
It was like Spider-Man, this one scene assembles.
Yes. Again, listeners, if you happen to not be familiar with these people, this was essentially a Marvel roundtable. So Kevin Feige is the president of Marvel Studios. He's the primary producer / mastermind of the entire MCU. Joe and Anthony Russo are most often called the Russo brothers. They're directors. In the MCU, they directed Winter Soldier, Civil War, Infinity War, and Endgame. But I love them for their work on Arrested Development and Community. They're actually very funny guys, which you wouldn't always know in the MCU. Tom Holland is the latest Spider-Man, aka Peter Parker. And of course, Robert Downey Jr. is Iron Man. So that's who we've got in this episode.
No women.
No women.
No women around. No women in this episode.
Oh boy. Yeah. So during this Marvel Roundtable, they are eating food at a restaurant in Atlanta called The Optimist. It's a seafood restaurant. And before they get to jibber-jabbing about their time at Marvel shooting movies together, Jon and Roy got together with the chef Ford Fry, and they made a lobster roll and shrimp toast.
Oh, but before that...
Even before that, they went to a restaurant called Holman and Finch, which is a gastropub. And there they talked with Chef Spencer Gomez.
I kind of like how Jon just, like, jumps in the line, but then just going, I'm getting grease all over me, so they give him an apron. I don't know. There's, like I said, it's on the line for me where I'm like, I like it, but I don't like it. I don't know. There's that whole, like, male assertiveness thing there.
Oh, there's a lot of male assertiveness in this whole episode. I agree. I do think on an average day, it would probably be disruptive and annoying to have a celebrity drop into your restaurant and be, let me work the line, you know. But they did have a brief interview with some of the line cooks at the start of this episode, and they were all huge fans of Chef the movie. One of the guys said that it inspired him to get back into his career working in restaurants. Another one had knuckle tattoos like Jon Favreau's character had in the movie. So clearly this particular restaurant was quite thrilled to have them there for this shoot.
Yeah, fanboys.
A lot of fanboys. This episode could be called Boys Fanboying Over Other Boys.
Truly.
I will say I thought that the lobster roll and the shrimp toast both looked really delicious. Again, they talk about the grilled cheese here. They talk about making bread perfectly toasted and perfectly golden. They pretty much say bread is the key to everything, and then they just opine about bread for a while.
Holy poop, all that butter, though.
Oh man, so
shrimp.
much butter. Like 4 huge dollops of butter in the shrimp.
I don't know what listeners are going to think of it, but whatever. It's our podcast. But there is definitely like some vibes in this show where the men are just like, yeah. Like, even that scene, like, more butter. That's what I do. If someone doesn't want butter, fuck them. Like, I'm the man here, you know?
Well, and also during the Marvel Roundtable, Tom Holland is asking fanboy-y questions of Roy Choi about what it's like to be a chef. And pretty much every story that he shared, I thought was sort of like, let me tell you a story about machismo. Because Tom Holland asked, well, what's this thing, this crushing thing, or getting crushed in a kitchen? And Roy's like, oh, yeah, it's when you get together in the kitchen and you show off all your skills and you're like, oh, yeah, show me what you can do. And it's competitive, but it's also sharing. And I was like, yeah, that sounds like a dick measuring contest, maybe. I mean, I could be wrong, but that was the impression I was getting. I'm not a chef. I don't know. I haven't worked the line at a restaurant, so I could be totally off base there. But again, a lot of his stories were what I would consider like food restaurateur war stories, which traditionally is dominated by men, unfortunately. Once you get into these professional roles, a lot of professional chefs and kitchens tend to push out women in some environments.
Yeah. I don't know. There is still a fondness that they have for each other, but the fondness comes after you've, like, championed the task, you know? After you've proved yourself worthy, then there's fondness.
You have to prove your worth. You have to prove your mettle, that you've got the chops to do it. It just kind of sounds like hazing to me, though.
Like, can we just show us how the food's made?
Definitely a different vibe than Taste the Nation, that's for sure.
Yeah, I don't know. Then they talk about all Marvel. I guess they talk Marvel stuff.
This is where I knew that I was too plugged into all the Marvel shit, because when they were talking about how Tom did his scene with Chris Evans, they didn't even say Chris Evans, by the way. They just said Chris, but there are a million Chris's in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But I happen to know this anecdote. I'd heard it before. He was doing this scene with Chris Evans, and it said in the script, Spider-Man flips into frame. And they were like, oh, you don't have to do that. But Tom Holland is so athletic and such a performer that he's like, I can do it. So apparently he literally did this acrobatic flip into the scene, and everyone was super impressed. So they talked about that, and I was like, I can't believe I already knew this anecdote. I kind of hate myself a little.
Well, you're a Marvel super fan.
Oh, they did also share, I meant to say this in the Gwyneth episode, but one reason why I do think it was good to start with Gwyneth is that apparently Gwyneth introduced Roy Choi and Jon Favreau. So it's kind of like, if it weren't for her, then none of this maybe would have happened. So I think that Jon and Roy were grateful that she was sort of matchmaker for them. But apparently, they talk about this in this episode as well, Gwyneth commissioned Roy Choi's food truck to come to the set of Iron Man to feed the cast and crew. So that's how it all started.
Yeah, that was a good day for them, where they didn't have to have whatever their basic crafty, which is still very probably super fancy because they're Jon Favreau and the Avengers on Marvel movies.
Yeah,
and they're
exactly.
like, ew, our food. And I'm like, you guys make millions of dollars. Your crafty must be fantastic.
No, we must get a food truck run by a James Beard Award winner.
This is an interesting show.
And they make roast mojo pork again.
Yes, they've got their one recipe down from the movie. Roy does really put Jon to work on the line there. There's something about it where, like, I don't know how to describe it. That this is the point where I was just like, okay, so he wants to live like this average guy's life, but so he pays people a lot of money so he can just be a line cook.
I will say, as a compliment to the chef movie, they did a good job of making it seem like Jon Favreau knew what he was doing in that movie. Because I watched the movie and I was like, oh, well, clearly they've cut away to someone else's hands doing the chopping here. Like, I'm pretty sure that's not Jon doing that. But still, it's like, well, but they made him look competent enough that I could believe this guy was a chef. So kudos to them in the movie. But then looking in the show, I'm like, oh, wow, yeah, he really actually is pretty amateurish, which I found interesting. Like, he's fine, you know, it seems like he's perfectly capable home cook, but to see that he was definitely not at a professional level contrasted with the portrayal of the character in the movie, I thought they did a good job.
Interesting to note that, yeah. When you said vanity project, I was like, that's it. Those are the words.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
I do think it's really cute, though, that we saw Tom Holland have his first oyster.
That was very cute, and I'm surprised he hadn't had one before.
Yeah.
Tom Holland is always a delight. What an adorable, wide-eyed kid. And I know Amanda would agree with me.
Yes. Yes, she would. If Amanda were here right now, she's ascended she's on a different plane. We've lost her. Yeah. So, yeah, I think I'm good with these two, and we'll talk about the next two next episode. We'll see how it goes. I mean, like I said, well, like you said, also, a lot of people like this show. They've got a lot of episodes of it. Maybe this is just the beginning, you know?
Yeah, maybe it takes a little while to find its feet. It certainly has been picked up for multiple episodes and multiple seasons, so maybe we won't complain so much next episode. We'll see. But in the meantime, let's find out what's on our back burner for this episode. Today we are talking about On the Job with Priya Krishna. This is a 3-part YouTube series from Priya and New York Times Cooking. Priya has a background in food journalism, so she's really getting a chance to flex her food journalism wings. Is that a metaphor? I don't know. Anyway,
Yeah.
The description of On the Job with Priya Krishna is as follows. Have you ever wondered about the person who makes your breakfast sandwiches every morning, or the labor that goes into the foods you're delivered when you're too tired to cook? And what happens to your dirty napkin after you leave a restaurant? Well, we'll show you on our new series, On the Job with Priya Krishna. So at time of recording, 2 episodes have been released. One is called How to Run a TikTok Famous Bodega, and the second episode is What It Takes to Run a Virtual Restaurant. Have you watched any of these, Justine?
I watched them all. And yeah, the third one, which should be coming out in a week, probably when this episode is released, is about a linen service. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I watched them all. I have thoughts. But first thought is that, like, this is definitely entirely, like, Priya's shit. Like,
yes.
This is what she... This is right in her zone.
This is what she's trained for. Yes, this is very much in her wheelhouse. It's food meets interviewing people on the street, and it's all in New York, which is obviously a very active food scene. So it's very topical. It's very relevant, especially in these pandemic times when the restaurant industry has seen a lot of transformations.
I think, though, that these 2 episodes... There's this whole sort of, like, backlash to hustle culture right now.
True.
Because people are doing, like, way too much and, like, overworking themselves, especially in a pandemic. And I think that kind of these episodes maybe have highlighted the dark side, but not really, really, like, noted it. I mean, Priya, in both episodes, is like, you do this and this and this and this and this on top of working a full-time job. And they're like, yep, that's what I do. And I'm like, you are going to suffer from so much stress.
Yeah, Priya has been very astute and aware about this, and she has asked them questions like, do you think this is sustainable? She's basically asking, aren't you going to burn yourself out at this pace if you keep doing this? So I agree. I do think it is shining a spotlight on how everyone's expected to monetize hobbies or even have to work multiple jobs to make ends meet.
Yeah. Like, so the episodes can be very like, oh man, this is really cool. Like, this bodega owner who runs it makes these awesome sandwiches, famous TikToker, like, he must have a glamorous life. But still, like, dude is like working himself to death.
Yeah, when he's not mugging for TikTok videos for all these customers coming in, he's stocking shelves, he's doing inventory, he's clearly working 24/7. And he says, you know, this is all him working towards wanting to open his own store. So a lot of hustle going on. I was honestly shocked that Liana Blount, in the second episode, the owner of Black Rican Vegan, I was shocked that she had a full-time job, because her describing what she had to do for the Black Rican Vegan food, for the prep, for the shopping, for the delivery, I just wrongly assumed that that was her full-time job. I don't understand how she does it. It's crazy. It's awesome. But yeah, major props to both of these people interviewed so far.
And I will say, definitely Raheem in the first episode mentioned he's made enough money from TikTok, like, doesn't need to work.
Yeah.
And it seems like also Liana, she's also made a lot of money from, you know, her business of selling, you know, her virtual restaurant, her food, because she sells out constantly. So it's like, at what point is it enough for people to just, like, kick back? Is it because they don't have like the passive income at that point, then they're worried of like, well, if I just stop now, like the money flow will instantly stop.
Well, it's interesting too, because I think in Raheem's case, I think it's smart to continue working because TikTok trends don't last very long. So this might not be a source of income even a few weeks from now. And it sounds like he wants to save up capital to start his own store. And in Liana's case, she said her goal was to have products on store shelves. And I think she listed another goal that I can't remember right now. But maybe at this point, they're just like, I gotta save as much as possible so that I can make the big thing happen for me.
Yeah. And it's interesting that both of these folks find success on social media, which I think, again, straight up like Priya's like wheelhouse of like investigating what is happening in the now and what is, you know, outside of like what people normally think of when they think of like food and restaurants, of like, yeah, on TikTok, you know, this thing becomes big and then all of a sudden he blows up and everybody wants to, you know, watch the TikToks, which are monetized and gives them money, but then also go so they can show up and be in the TikToks and like meet him as a celebrity. And then having a virtual restaurant on Instagram, I kind of knew was a thing because I do have friends who have pop-ups, but they also have physical locations too. Pop-ups, they don't do exactly like she does. They are like, hey, I'll be at this bar in this section selling my food here. So come to me to buy the food instead of what she's doing, which is getting all the food, putting the menu up, and then delivering. That's a crazy extra step.
Yeah, absolutely. Something that I really like about this docuseries, that I like about really good documentaries in general, is that it explores this niche part of some culture. So even if you think you know how restaurants are run or you feel like you're familiar with this, it's a very specific subsection of restaurant culture. And like you said, specifically restaurants that are informed in a large way by social media. So I think the concept's really interesting. I'm very keen to know what the linens episode is going to look like.
Yeah, it's probably going to be quite different.
Yeah, I'm guessing Linen's laundering services probably don't go to social media to get their customer base.
Yeah. But I will say the Black Rican vegan, I was like, she is 100% right. This is food that I've never seen veganized before. And she is a genius coming up with these recipes.
The food looked so good. I really enjoyed the first episode, but I liked the second episode even more. I was like, oh, wow, this food looks amazing. Because most of the food in the first episode was kind of like wacky food. Like, oh, let's pour Fruity Pebbles on a breakfast sandwich and stack it up really, really high. Whereas the second episode is like, look at this amazing, delicious food. And she apparently has a vegan oxtail that I think she called like mocktail or something like that. That I thought was very clever. And yeah, I just hope both of these people really succeed in their endeavors.
Hi, Amanda.
Amanda's back.
We are in our back burner currently.
Cool.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I'm back. For the back burner, I only got a chance to watch the trailer, and it definitely looked interesting.
Well, we both highly recommend it so far, and we're looking forward to the third and final episode of On the Job.
Awesome. So I'll try to catch up for the next back burner.
That's going to do it for our back burner. We're going to move on to shout outs. Big thanks to everyone who reaches out to us on social media. Speaking of social media, it really helps when you interact with us, and we love reading your comments. Shout out to Heidi from the Vibrant Visionaries podcast, who listened to our Taste Nation potluck episode and shared a YouTube video which explained why you need that good hot pineapple juice to get your Jell-O to set.
Yeah, apparently there are certain enzymes in pineapple juice that break down the gelatin. And you know what else has those enzymes in it? Mango. So the fact that I used cold pineapple mango juice defeated the purpose of everything.
Explains why your pineapple Jell-O didn't set.
Thanks, Heidi.
Science.
We would also encourage you to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or really anywhere that you listen to our podcast. Reviews really help us out, and we'll read it right here on the podcast to thank you. Also, be sure to check out our merch. Go to podappetit.threadless.com. Get yourself a shirt, a tote bag, a mask, anything cool with our logo on it. Check it out. And stay tuned for our next episode. We'll be covering The Chef Show, Season 1, Volume 1, Episode 3, Chef Film Recipes, and Episode 4, Remembering Jonathan Gold.
Bye!
See ya!
Thanks for listening to Pod Appétit Gourmet Takes.
We'd love to hear from you, so find us on Twitter and Instagram at pod_appetit.
And on Facebook at Pod Appétit Podcast.
You can also email us at podappetitpodcast@gmail.com and find all of our episodes on our website, podappetitpodcast.com.
Hey, I'm Shar.
And I'm Kelly, and together we host Drinking and Screaming.
We're a new horror discussion podcast based out of Vancouver, British Columbia, where each episode we pair a new cocktail with our movie of the week.
For instance, I'm pairing this ad with just a shot of tequila. You know, because most ads are horrible.
With Drinking and Screaming, you'll find yourself pulled into a new horror film to discuss and a new cocktail to try every week.
Every episode is laced with great soundtracks, theme breakdowns, production trivia, Char's bad drinks, and so much more.
What?
I said clips from the movie.
New episodes every week. Join in on the spoops. Drinking and Screaming, wherever podcasts are found.
I give this ad a 5 out of 10.
You know, we don't rate the movies.
5 out of 10.